Are you
morning.
ready?
I am.
Yeah,
Give
okay.
me,
Let us wait just 2 or 3 minutes. Some more participants have to enter.
okay, sounds good. See if I can sit here.
Hi, Sarah. How are you?
I'm great. How are you, Asha?
Yeah, I'm also good.
Good. How's the conference going?
Yeah, it just started today morning and it's going good.
Good. It looks like there's some really interesting topics.
Yes, there was a good
Very,
discussion today about the
yeah,
various
I'm
research done
excited.
being different faculties, research scholars. It was nice.
Good. Very good. How's the weather?
It's kind of raining and a bit cold, so it's a
Okay.
mixture of both.
Okay.
Yeah, so how is it there?
Not bad. Actually, it's usually pretty cold by now, but it's rainy and kind of just overcast, but it has been fairly warm, like let's see. So let me see if I can convert in my head. 40s here. So what would that be, like 10-ish for you
Oh,
all? So
okay.
not bad. I mean, usually it's really cold by now, so I'm happy.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, 4. I wasn't talking before. I was talking before, but I had my microphone off. So I'm talking now. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can. Even before
Okay,
we
good.
could hear you.
You couldn't hear me before?
Yes, we could. We could.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, I turned the microphone off for a second. Do you like my fake library? Isn't it pretty?
Yeah, I was just looking at it. It's not very familiar to me. Like I've
I
never
know.
seen this kind of a
I know, the backgrounds are so funny. I'm sitting in my bedroom, like, it's not very pretty in the background, so
Okay.
I have to have something else.
Yeah, it looks pretty.
Cincy, are
You
you
are trying
talking?
to say something, but you are on
Yeah.
mute.
Yes.
Yeah, during our coil program also you do like this way now.
Yes. Oh. I'm going to climb up on the ladder behind me and I'm going to get a book out, show it to you all.
It's very handy. Yes.
Oh.
Asha, shall we start now?
Yes, yes, we can start. Good evening, all. The research cell and the internal quality assurance cell of St. Stephen's College, Uravur, has been organizing the multidisciplinary conference and paper presentation competition, which is titled QUAESITIO from 2020. Now, it's been 3 years and it's the third time that we are organizing QUAESITIO. And this year, we have titled the event as QUAESITIO 22-23. Today, I would like to welcome all who are present in this meeting to the invited talk session of QUAESITIO of Life Science Department. First of all, I'd like to invite our head of the department, Mr. Biju Thomas, for the welcome address.
Thank you, Ashamis. Good evening to one and all present here. Today, we all have gathered here to participate in the international online conference QUAESITIO 2022-23 in Life Science discipline, organized by the Department of Zoology, St. Stephen's College, Uravur. Being the HOD of the department, I am highly honored and privileged to be given the opportunity to address everyone on this very special occasion. Our department is organizing the conference QUAESITIO since 2020 every year. Since its inception in 2020, it had improved gradually as an international conference as if today. It's my pleasure to introduce the chief guest of tonight, Dr. Sarah Finch, Associate Professor of Biology and Biotechnology, Sinclair College, Ohio, USA, who is a renowned scholar and a wonderful teacher. It is such a privilege to have her as the chief guest of today's seminar. It's high time and want to mention that our department is having collaboration with Sinclair College, and Dr. Sarah is very much instrumental in bringing up such a collaboration. Today, Dr. Sarah will deliver the talk on climate change and its relationship to environmental justice, inequality, and health equity. We are very grateful to Dr. Sarah Finch for accepting our invitation and making her presence here. I feel honored to welcome Dr. Sarah Finch to this important program. Welcome, Dr. Sarah. I also feel honored to welcome all the participants and my fellow colleagues for taking a keen part in this important program. I am sure that you all will feel enriched with the knowledge after completion of this event. I welcome you all once again to the seminar and hope that you all will have a great time ahead. Thank you all. I now invite Dr. Sarah to enlighten the audience with your expert deliberations. Over to you, Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you. That was very kind. I'm very excited to be here. Let me see if I can pull up this screen. Let's see. Oh, not that one. I was trying to do my conversions. Let's see if I can switch it. Stop sharing. Sorry, I have two screens right now. This is my first time with Google Meet. let's see, a window. This one. There we go. Okay, can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes, we can see your PowerPoint.
Okay, perfect. All right, let me go to present here. There we go. Okay, well now I can't see your faces, but that's okay. If you have questions, I would love to have you stop me while we're talking. So I'd like this to be a discussion, so feel free to jump in and ask any questions that you have. And like I said, I can't see your faces right now. But Asha, maybe if somebody has a question, could you stop me and let me know?
Yeah, sure, I'll do that.
Okay, that would be great. So thank you all for asking me to come. I'm very excited to be here. This is a topic that I have a lot of passion for. My graduate studies were in molecular genetics, which is not really related to climate change, but this is something that has become very important to me, and I feel like it is something that we need to do more talking about and making sure that people understand what's going on. But I think even more important than understanding what climate change is and how it's affecting us is how does climate change play a role in environmental justice? How does social inequalities around the world play into climate change, and also health equities? So I'd like to talk a little bit about each of those things and maybe some ideas for improving things in the future. So here we go. So just very quickly, I think most of us are familiar with the process of climate change and how it has actually happened, but just to make sure that we have a basic understanding of what that is, first we need to think about what the greenhouse effect is. And the greenhouse effect is actually very important for making sure that the world has the right temperature to support life. So we know that we have the sun, and the sun is the source of all the energy for the earth and all the organisms on the earth. We know that we have radiant energy coming from the sun, that some of that radiant energy is going to reflect back off of the earth, but also some of it will stay trapped within our atmosphere, as you can see, bouncing back to the earth, and then keeping the earth again at a suitable temperature for life. So that's a positive thing. What has started to happen over time is that we are now enhancing this greenhouse effect by emitting gases that are creating a very large shield around the earth. This atmosphere is getting thicker with these gases, and there are lots of greenhouse gases, but these are the three that really seem to be the biggest in terms of their effects on the, climate change. So carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide seem to be the three that are contributing most to this problem. So you can see that the shield is getting larger because of the accumulation of these gases, meaning that fewer or less amounts of this radiant energy are leaving. Therefore, we're trapping more heat close to the earth, and this is going to be increasing the temperature overall. So in the past, when we talked about this, we always talked about global warming, right? That was what we called it. But then that became confusing for people because then we had winters that were more severe and weather patterns that changed overall. So instead of just calling it global warming, we're calling it climate change because it does change the climate overall. And it's not just the warming side of things, but also the cold side of things that are affected as well. So this is something that has been going on for a long period of time. And looking at what are the major causes, and I've got some links in here. I won't show you all of them, and I'll pass these slides on if you are interested and people want to see them, but they have the resources that I've used for them. But majorly, again, man-made causes. So if we think about what are the reasons that these greenhouse gases have been emitted, these are the biggest reasons. Generating heat and electricity. Predominantly, the way that we generate heat and electricity worldwide is by burning fossil fuels. So coal, oil, and gas, as we burn those, are releasing these gases into the atmosphere. So that's a major source. Manufacturing goods. So if we think about, again, powering our factories that we need to create these goods, consuming lots of different resources, and these manufacturing plants releasing these gases as well. A big factor is the fact that we are cutting down trees and forests. And as we deforest and cut down trees to make room for people to live, or for pastures or farms, to grow food, or even to raise animals, as we cut down those forests, we are, again, if we remember photosynthesis and think about the fact that trees are taking up carbon dioxide, which is one of the major gases, as we cut those down, we're reducing the ability to reduce carbon dioxide levels in our environment. So we're doing the opposite of what we want. We want to be actually planting more trees and forests so that we can help to reduce some of these carbon dioxide levels. So that's a major problem. Transportation, of course, thinking about all sources of transportation, so moving people around, producing food, and again, thinking about cutting down forests. But not only are we, again, cutting down the forest, but as we are raising animals for food, we think about the fact that we are sending some of the food that we could be giving to people to those animals. But then also those animals are emitters of methane. So think about cows and sheep and all of the things that we might eat in various parts of the world as food sources. So that's another contributing factor to climate change. And then powering buildings and homes, a very large percentage of our heat and electricity goes to powering our buildings and homes for air conditioning and heat. And then the last one is just consuming too much, thinking of the consumer economy. And the United States is a big factor in this. We are throwing things away. We don't fix things. We buy things. We're like, okay, let's just get rid of this. We'll get something new. So by consuming too much, we are asking manufacturing companies to make more and more and more of things when really that's just contributing to the problem. So these are all things that we know, but these are the major things that are causing these gases to accumulate in our atmosphere. There are some populations of people that do not believe in climate change. This is a big problem in the United States. It has become a political issue, which is very interesting because it's a scientific fact. We have data that supports that our man-made gases are contributing to the warming of our planet, which leads to climate change. So for some reason, science is discounted by certain people, but we do know that it is real. There is lots and lots of data that supports it. These are some of the major things that seem to be happening. Huge pattern changes in precipitation. So I know in India that in the monsoon season in September, there was some flooding in Bangalore. So monsoon season we know is normal, but there were higher amounts of precipitation that fell that caused problems for a lot of areas around you. Droughts are going up, lots of heat waves all over the world, fires, which again, that's a natural part of the process for biodiversity and for our Earth, but increasing amounts of fires. The loss of Arctic ice is very, very important. So dramatic reduction in our cryosphere, we call it, which is the frozen portions of our planet. That loss of Arctic ice then leads to sea level rise, which is a very big problem for a large percentage of the population of the world, because a lot of us live near oceans and live near edges of the land. And then hurricanes become tsunamis become very, very big and stronger and more intense because the water is warming in the sea. So lots and lots of things that we see, and we are feeling those effects. So I guess my question to you is, if you think about and again, we typically have a lifespan of 100-ish years, right? Hopefully, if we're lucky. But have you seen any changes in your lifetime, things that have changed? I just mentioned the monsoon season for you was a little bit more dramatic from what I read. But are there other things that you've seen around you that are signs of climate change?
Yeah, I would like to add that before, during December, we never used to get rain. It was very
Mm.
rare. But this time we have a lot of rain, and it's due to some kind of activity that's happening around the sea area. So this is completely different, something I observed.
Okay. Yeah, I think as they call them gyres, the Gulf Stream and the other ocean currents are changing now too, because the seas are warming. And as those currents change, that changed precipitation patterns, which is very dramatic and different. Like you're saying, it's something that, we haven't seen before. Anybody else have anything that you have noticed or witnessed in your lifetime? Things that have changed maybe from when you were a child? Yeah, there are, again, and you don't have to talk now. You'll have to just let me know if you have questions along the way. But yeah, there are some things that I have noticed. Again, when I think about when I was a kid, so I live in Ohio, in the United States, and we are definitely farther north than where you are in India. So we do have winters with snow. And we have had a lot less snow. I don't know if you can see my cat, sorry. We've had a lot less snow in the past, 10, 15 years than we have had in the past. It usually is fairly cold by now in December. It's pretty mild right now. We've had a lot of rain lately too. So usually this would be snow at this point. So definitely something that I have noticed in terms of changing temperatures, at least here for us. So yeah, and again, I would encourage you to think back to previous times in your life, and do you recognize changes as you go through the year? So it's something to be. I think it's interesting to think about what's going on the personal level. So I wanted to talk just briefly about some evidence that we've seen here, and about the COP26 from last year, COP27 from this year. There is a intergovernmental panel on climate change, the IPCC, and it's the United Nations body for assessing science that's related to climate change. They released a report last year, August of 2021, which was pretty impactful because it was one of the first major reports that came out from this group that said, yeah, people are the reason that this is happening, and these are the dire situations that we can expect if we don't make some rapid changes to how we do things. So it was really kind of a big wake-up call. I mean, again, scientists have known these things for a long time, but the general population and non-scientific groups maybe were in a little bit of denial about these things, and talking about how the Earth has fluctuating patterns over the whole 4.6 billion years that the Earth has been here. That's true. We've gone through warming patterns and cooling patterns, but it is clear now, and these are statements that came out from this report last year, that unequivocal evidence that we humans have caused warming of our biosphere. So major widespread changes in our atmosphere, ocean, the cryosphere, which is, again, the frozen areas of our water system. And again, human influence has caused this. So lots of data. And again, that these warming trends have caused major weather and climate extremes. And we're seeing more and more of these extremes as we go on. And they seem to be getting more severe as time goes on as well. So again, just talking about some of the things that have been noticed. So I won't read all of this to you, but definitely things, this was their sort of conclusion from the end of this report. Deadly heat waves, floods, and drought will get worse if warming continues. And we are at this tipping point, and that's the term that you kind of hear a lot of people talking about, that we really need to make some drastic changes to the emissions that we are releasing. And if we don't do something pretty quickly, we're going to be getting into a really bad situation. And it's not even just our kids and their kids that will feel these effects, but we right, as individuals will be feeling these effects as well. So it's going to be happening so quickly that we will be suffering from these climate change effects that we're going to be seeing. These are just some headlines that I took from the news. This is from last summer. There's a couple from this year as well. And it's all over the place, right? You see it everywhere, all over the world, that things are getting very dramatic. This was really interesting. So in Canada, British Columbia typically don't get very hot. It does not get very hot there, but apparently last summer it was so hot. It was 121 degrees Fahrenheit. It was boiling these clams on the surface of these beaches. Like, they were literally baking in the sun and in the heat. So they were dying. So massive heat wave killed not only, again, a lot of animals, but people. There were high amounts of death as well. This is Southern Europe, looking at massive fires last summer. We've had massive fires in the United States this year as well. This is Greece. I actually visited Greece last summer, was 2021, and thankfully wasn't there for the hottest day. But if you look at how hot it was there, very hot. So we're seeing this again all over the place. If we think about, again, the rising sea level, lots and lots of people live near the coast. This is just the United States, but about 133 million people, which is about a third of our population, will be affected by rising sea levels. So people are it's gonna be mass migrations as these seas continue to rise. This is really interesting. I won't click in here, but this is a really dramatic website that shows you if the sea level were to rise 8 feet, how these cities would drown. And these are all states in the cities in the United States. But I would be interested to see if there is one for global cities as well. So really interesting how, again, some of our cities are so close to sea level that even just a small amount of rise causes major trouble. And just a few more facts here, and then we'll talk about the social inequality part too. This is looking at the cryosphere, again, the frozen portions of the water system. So 1955 sea thickness, and then if you look at 2050, this is predictions that will be about half of where we were. So again, all of that is melting, right? That's bringing sea levels up. So big changes. You can see, again, these are actual pictures looking at the cryosphere decreasing. This is right after I was born. So you can see just in my lifetime, right, massive differences in the amount of ice. And hurricanes, we've had a lot of really damaging hurricanes in the United States. I know lots of different tsunamis in other parts of the world. These are both Category 5 hurricanes, and categories have to do with the wind speed. So Category 5 is the highest level in terms of how fast the wind is flowing. So they're very damaging at Category 5. But if you look at the difference in the size, right, mile size between Hurricane Andrew, which caused massive amounts of damage in Florida, 1992 versus 2017, Irma, like massive size difference. And that, again, is because the seas are warming. As the seas warm, these storms have the ability to get bigger and bigger and just more devastating effects on people. So that's definitely something that we're seeing. And not only the size of these, but they're more frequent. We have more storms that we are seeing throughout the course of the hurricane season, at least over on this side. So again, if we think about, again, this is what NASA is looking at. NASA is a great website to look at in terms of climate change, and they have lots of great pictures and lots of great data. If you're talking with your students or other colleagues about this, they have some really interesting facts there. And again, pictures. I think pictures are really nice in helping people understand how things are going. But yeah, so we know that the effects of global warming is happening, which is leading to climate change. And we know that the people that are alive today, including us, are going to feel those effects, and they are going to get worse as time goes on. So that's the thing that we need to think about. So we know that people are to blame, right? We know that for sure, but it's not all people, right? It's not every person. There are people who are more responsible for the emission of these greenhouse gases. And this is really, I think, an impactful statement. And if you just take a second and let it sit with you, if we think about the wealthiest populations in the world, they do bear the greatest responsibility for these greenhouse gas emissions. And if we look at some numbers, the richest 1% of the global population account for more greenhouse gas emissions than the poorest 50% of the global population. That's amazing, right? If you think about that, like, that is terrible and shocking and should make us stop and think, right? What is going on here? And it's something that we need to pay attention to. So let's look at some more data here. If we look at, and this is interesting, I want to point this out too, that if you start looking at graphs and data, and we know this as scientists and mathematicians, that you can manipulate data to show something as you want it to be by changing what your axes are or changing what data you show. So by looking at this, we can see that the United States, from 1850 to 2021, we have more cumulative carbon dioxide emissions than any other country by far, right? So United States, you can see there. China is behind, you know, but again, a good amount. This is changing. So the amount that China is releasing is going up faster than the United States at this point. Here's India. And it's interesting, if you look at India and Germany have been changing places. If you look at different years, you're about the same as Germany. And it goes back and forth between the two. But I also was looking at looking at this graph. If you look at this graph per capita, meaning per person, it actually changes. And the one that's on the top is not the United States, it's actually Saudi Arabia. And that Saudi Arabia is a small country, but because of the fossil fuels that they are selling to the world and then using themselves, they actually have a greater amount per person than the United States does. So I just want to caution you to think about, make sure that you're looking at what is the graph showing you and what is the graph looking at, because this, I think, is an important number for us to understand. So again, and the other thing that I think is interesting is looking at what is the reason. So again, burning fossil fuels, creating cement, which is important for, again, building roads and buildings, and then the green is the land use, and then forestry. Again, cutting down forest is what we're thinking of here too. So this is, again, very indicative of who is causing the problem, right? So that's important to keep in mind. So just quickly to look at, I think this is really interesting. So something that there's a lot of data now that is coming out in the United States about how climate change is related to social inequities and inequalities. And this is something that has been going on for quite a long time, since the early 1930s. So as you know, the United States and lots of other places too, but the United States has a particularly troubling history with slavery. And there are lots and lots of atrocities that have been put upon people, terrible things that have happened, you know, and we know all of this. But as we move forward, after the Civil War that we had in the United States, which was about more than slavery, but slavery was a big part of it, the North fighting the South. Once slavery was abolished, that was a good thing. But the problem was that institutional policies were put in place by our government to keep individuals of color in a subordinate position. And one of the policies that was put in place was something called redlining. And redlining, I'm going to show you a quick little video about this. Redlining is a way that people of color have been kept in subordinate positions. And it's something that not everybody knows. Here, let me pull this over here. Can you see this?
You could just see the slide, nothing else.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, we can see that red lining. Red lining.
Okay, cool. Let me switch real quick. How do I? Sorry. Here is Google Meet. Here, let me switch. Sorry. Zoom is the one that I'm usually used to using, so I gotta get, here we go. Okay, now I'm back. Okay, so share, window.
Till now it was working.
Okay. There we go. Okay, so we'll watch this quickly, just so you know what, can you see that now?
Yes, yes, we can see your presentation.
So redlining is something that's been happening in the United States since the 1930s. So literally banks would go into communities and they would draw red lines around areas where people of color lived, and they would decide not to give mortgages or lend money to those people. So the areas where white people lived were in areas that were green, and those were acceptable for lending practices. So this was actually put into place in 1934. It was called the HOLC. So these areas, again, were specifically redlined, and these areas were not able to be lived in by people of color. What's happened is that because of this redlining practice, a lot of people in the United States have built wealth. A lot of people have built wealth, not institutional, but family wealth and generational wealth has been built by the owning of property. And I think that happens in lots of places. And because these individuals of color were not given mortgages to buy homes, then this generational gap has been building and building and building. So now it has been very difficult for people to do things that have been much easier for white people to do. So again, this redlining practice has been a has had a major impact on lots of things. So let me see if I can get my screen back up here. Oh, sorry. There we go. All right, let me get back to where I was. And quickly, because I want to talk about the global impacts of this. Can you see my PowerPoint now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so if we look at what has happened because of redlining, and this is a huge topic right now in the United States and something that really is important, but we see, again, health outcomes are actually lower. So people of color have lower lifespans. They have less access to healthcare, less access to healthy foods. Incarceration rates, the United States is absolutely terrible. We have we are number one in terms of putting people in jail for lots of things. And predominantly populations of color are incarcerated at much higher rates than whites. And then reduced funding for all of these different things: schools, green spaces, transport, access to transport to get to things, different healthcare, again, foods. And so these redlining effects have been very dramatic. And there's a lot of studies that show that not only is it the redlining that's caused problems in terms of acquiring wealth and access to all of these things, but actually now we're seeing direct climate effects on these redlined areas. So there's a study that came out, and this was 2020, so early 2020, showing that these cities in the United States that have been redlined are actually warmer. So 5 degrees Fahrenheit warmer is the average. Portland, Oregon actually had a difference in redlined and non-redlined neighborhoods of up to 12 degrees Fahrenheit. So, and we know this by looking at the overlay of maps. So this is a picture of Richmond, Virginia. Richmond, Virginia is on the east coast of the United States. It's the capital of Virginia. On the left, you can see this was the actual redlining grid that was drawn for the city. You can see that the areas where whites lived were in the green and the blue areas. The areas where people of color, typically Black African Americans, lived in these so yellow and red areas. And then when we look at the heat index in these areas, you can see that in the areas where there are the greens and the blues, there's a lower temperature. And then if we look at the areas, again, that were redlined, we have much higher temperatures in those areas. So we call those heat islands. And you know, again, if you've been around and you have very hot temperatures where you are, that those concrete jungles trap the heat, right, and make it hotter. Fewer green spaces, again, help to increase temperatures as well. So directly seeing major differences there. And then not only is it heat islands where we have this redlining effect, but these neighborhoods that have been redlined are at greater risk of flooding. So we see that they have subpar sewer and water management systems. The infrastructure is not maintained at the level that the areas that were not redlined are maintained at, because taxation is different. Political capital leads to these differences as well. So the discriminatory housing practices have led to major differences in flooding in these heat islands. So again, I know I'm going through this quickly, but I want to get to the world issues as well. So this is just showing you, again, in the homes that were graded, again, the green, so the white areas versus the Black areas or the African-American areas, you can see, again, much greater flood risks in these areas that were redlined. So again, it's happening all over the United States that we see this. So not only, again, are we seeing these climate change effects disproportionately in disadvantaged populations in the United States, but we also see it in places worldwide, right? So it's happening all over the place. And the COP26 and COP27 have been very eye-opening, I think, for a lot of people, because a lot of these countries are sending delegates and presidents and people to let us know what's going on, right? Show us some of the pictures and some of the data and some of these places that really are not in world news very much, and they should be. But I think it's important that these places are coming and telling us what's going on in their situation and how they're encountering outsized effects of climate change. So this is right during or after COP26 from last year. There was a big push for developing a fund to actually help these nations that are not the ones that are emitting, right? Remember, so back to our graph, the 1%, the wealthiest 1% are releasing more carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases than the lowest 50% of the world. So again, countries like the United States, some countries in the Euro, are more responsible, right, for these emissions. And what has happened is that these developing countries, they don't have very high emissions, and some of them even have negative emissions, but they're bearing the brunt of all of these effects. So huge waves, floods, droughts, So the Maldives, actually, which is, likely west of India, is actually one of the places that has had major effects. So those islands are slowly being eaten by the sea one by one. And if we don't reverse the trend, those islands are going to be completely gone. So if you think about people that live there, where are they going to go, right? It's their homes are being swallowed up because of these rising sea levels, and they are not the people that caused the problem, right? Here's another example, Kiribati. So Kiribati, this is off of the coast. It's actually pretty much in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. This is Hawaii right here. So that's United States, Hawaii, and Kiribati. This is a picture from Kiribati. They actually are already having to move. They've lost islands already. So the climate migration has begun. And again, these are people that have not contributed in any real way to the greenhouse gas emissions, but they're suffering, right? Their livelihoods they're forced to be changed because of what the developed countries have done in terms of their emissions. These again there's quite a few stories of climate migration. So like I said, that island of Kiribati, islands, it's a bunch of islands. People are already being displaced. But again, different areas in the world. So again, fires are causing people to move, droughts are causing people to move, Philippines, again, typhoons, the rains, Honduras. So it's happening everywhere. Extreme climate in Somalia is causing people to have to be moved to different locations, and not even sometimes temporarily, sometimes forever, right? Like in the case of those islands. So that's something to think about. This is from India. So again, I mentioned this is a picture of Bangalore, flooded roadways, Silicon Valley of India, right, is Bangalore. And apparently people were taking tractors, and I was watching videos of people taking tractors to work because the streets were so flooded that the cars and the transport systems were not working because of this. So again, major impacts because of monsoon rains that were greater than typical. So we see this all over the place. So coming back to this idea of, again, the disproportionate emissions, right? And it's not just the emissions that the wealthier countries are emitting that are causing trouble. It's also the policies that are put in place by these wealthier countries as opposed to developing countries. So if we think of investment decisions that are made by wealthy countries, right? So we make decisions about where we're going to invest money for companies. We make decisions about what types of research we're going to do to actually think about combating climate change. The other piece of this is that with capitalism, that these companies have outsized effects and they are obstructing green policies. So if you think about, again, bottom line for companies in a capitalist society is profits. They want to make money, right? And often they only care about making money. Now, thankfully, there are lots of companies that are investing in other things and valuing more than just money. They're valuing people, and they're valuing the earth and the climate. So those are the companies that I think we need to put more of our resources behind as individuals who care about the climate. But again, if we think about companies that just care about profits, they're going to have people in place in political positions that are lobbying for the politicians to obstruct any green policies, right? We don't want to have to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions because this is making us money. And if we have to go green, right, and find other ways of producing energy or producing whatever thing that we're making, then that's going to threaten our profits. So again, if we think about all they care about is profits, and then they have power to obstruct these policies politically. So that's another piece of it. And the other side of it is that if you have individuals who are, again, poorer groups, and, you know, thinking in the United States, individuals who have less money, have less social capital, they are also afraid of making climate change policies because they think that they're going to lose jobs and they're going to lose wages because the companies that they work for, these large capitalist companies, are going to go out of business or lay them off because they have to make these changes for climate reasons. So again, it's the emissions for sure, but it's all the other pieces, right, that really are a major factor in what's contributing to this inequality that continues to happen, not just in the United States, but everywhere we see this. So that's something that's really important. So this is actually from this year. So inequality is not only accelerating climate change, but also standing in the way of urgently needed action. So that's what I was describing, this idea that these inequalities that we see, right, in these levels is a very major issue, and also is holding back our ability to control climate change. So we have to make structural policies that are made for everybody. And I think that's one thing that we really need to focus on and do our best to understand, is that we are a global population of people, right? We are a species, Homo sapiens, and we need to think of each other and how we're impacting each other. And we have to put equality at the root and at the goal and at the heart of climate action. So that's something that really needs to happen. So if we look at, again, people, again, that are in developing countries or have lower economic resources in different areas, larger percentages of their income are used to provide housing and food, right? Not only that, but they have fewer social resources. So people in their lives also have less money and less access to savings, generational wealth, right? Like I was talking about before, if you don't have that generational wealth, then more of your income goes to making sure that we can stay alive, right? If you are less economically advantaged, you're more likely to live in less sturdy, well-constructed housing, which is more likely to be affected by fires and wind and flooding, right? And if you then deal with a climate shock, so a hurricane, a fire, a flood, if you are in this group of people, you're less likely to be able to recover because you have less resources, right? Now, if you're a person that has money, right, a considerable amount of money, well, then maybe I just don't take a vacation this year. I don't go somewhere this year. I can fix my house from the flood, but it's not going to cause me major trouble, and it's not going to be a generational problem. It's not going to affect my kids and their kids, whereas people that are in this situation, it does. It affects generations, and sometimes they're never able to recover. So it's always the poor, the less economically advantaged that lose more wealth with every climate shock that they have. And sometimes the recovery is never, right? So that's the major issue that we're seeing. So we have to think about how can we change things, right? And how does creating equality and equity within these populations, how does it help to reduce climate change? And these are all very big questions. And it's, like I said, something that I'm thinking a lot about, how biology and science has an interplay with sociology and psychology and looking at other aspects of things. This is really interesting. And again, we talk a lot at Sinclair, where I work, we talk a lot about equity and the difference between equity and equality, because we have students that we're trying to help increase success rates. So if you look at inequality, what is that? It's unequal access to opportunities. So you can see this person is getting the apple, this person's not. Equality is evenly distributed tools and assistance. So this kid is getting apples, but equal, right? The ladders are the same size. This kid still isn't getting any apples because the system, right, is designed in a way, in this case, the tree, that this kid can't reach those apples. Equity is when we give people tools that allow them to have access to our normal systems. So in this case, again, a smaller ladder, this kid gets a bigger ladder to get access to the apples. So that's good because now we're helping this kid to have some of the resources that we want or the accomplishments. But justice is really what we're looking for. So justice is not only giving people equal things, but also fixing the system, right? Justice is fixing the system, in this case, bending the tree back so that both of these kids are able to have access to these resources. So this is the hardest thing to do, right? Equity is what we can do with a broken system, right? By providing tools and things that are necessary. But ultimately, we would like for everyone to have equality, but then the justice piece is fixing the major problem. And that's really what we need to focus on. And when we think about, again, how do we fix these things? These are massive, massive issues. And it's not something that you just, wave a magic wand and it all goes away. We have to think about the fact that inequalities are dividing people, right? So if we think about inequalities, either because of race in the United States or because of income levels, right? Or in developing versus non-developing countries, these inequalities divide people. And if there are inequalities, that leads to corruption, typically within the governmental systems. And those inequalities then maintain the inequalities, right? So if we think about people that are in charge of governments, they put these policies in place to maintain their position, right? That's what they're trying to do. So we have to figure out a way to eradicate these inequalities by creating well-functioning governments. And well-functioning governments doesn't always mean democracy. It doesn't mean capitalism. I'm not sure exactly what it means because there are well-functioning governments that are different than those systems. But the main thing is that the people that live within this government need to trust their political leaders, and there should be a shared sense of responsibility and a shared sense of we're all in this together, right? So let's take care of everyone. Let's find a way for these things to be better for everyone. So once we get these governments in place, then these governments that are trusted by the people and the governments that care about their people and are not, that are working towards equality, right, and not inequality, those governments will then be more likely to want to make changes and changes in their policies that will reduce climate change. Not only for their individuals, their constituents, but then worldwide, right? So that's the other thing, is that we need to think as a group. We need to have group think as a globe, because that's the issue. If one country makes changes, and there are a lot of countries that are doing really good things, that's great, but it has to be a whole group, right? It has to be the entire world, because we're all sharing this one biosphere. And if we all don't make these changes, then we're all going to be suffering from these effects. But again, unfortunately, it's countries that have not been the ones typically that are causing the trouble that are feeling these effects. So really, we need to think about how are we going to distribute wealth, power, and social status within countries, but then worldwide, right? It's the same issue that we see in lots of different situations. We produce enough food worldwide to feed everybody, but it's distributed poorly, right? So there's a lot of waste in areas like the United States. If we all ate less meat, right? And we all took the agriculture and grew corn and soy and rice in places where we were actually using that land for growing animals to eat or raising animals, and we distributed those things in better ways, there would be we could feed everyone, but we have to have the will to do it, right? And the governments that are in place need to have more than just profits in mind when they're thinking about these things. So again, these are sort of big ideas, I know, and it's going to take a lot of people with the desire to make these changes for this to happen. So there are a lot of proposals, obviously, for how to help countries and populations that are being affected at major ways that the developed countries are not seeing. Obviously, renewable energies, that's got to be the #1 thing that we have to do. We have to get away from fossil fuels. So solar, wind, water, geothermal, we've got to put these in place, and we've got to do it like today, right? So there are places that are doing it. There are lots of countries that are doing it in a much better way than we are. I actually just visited Scotland recently. They actually produce so much wind power that they are selling wind power to other countries, which is fantastic. So we have to find ways to create renewable energy and get that renewable energy to everyone worldwide. The other thing that we need to think about is if we're going to continue to burn fossil fuels, we need to tax it in a way that countries that are burning these fossil fuels are putting this money into a fund that is going to help countries like Barbados and Kiribati and the Maldives, like we said, help these countries that are suffering from these climate change effects to combat that, right? So where is the money going to come from to help these countries that are not actually contributing to greenhouse gases? So loss and damage is a major thing that is really being discussed a lot, and that happened. So this is a picture, again, looking at climate justice. So climate change, again, it is a justice initiative, and it needs to be looked at in terms of not just individual countries, but worldwide. So obviously we need to phase out fossil fuels. A major reason that in the United States, a lot of people push back against like getting rid of fossil fuels is because whole areas. So think about areas like West Virginia, it's a state, lots of coal miners live there and work there. And it's been coal miners for generations, and that's all they've ever done. And families are supported by that. So they're worried, right, that if we don't get coal out of the ground and use it to burn for energy and heat, that they'll be out of a job. So we have to find a way to take people that are in fossil fuels and move them into sustainable energy sources, right? Let's retrain them in solar power, or retrain them in wind power, or whatever it might be. We have to find a way to do this so that those workers are on board with it, but then also are going to be able to maintain a life as well. And the other thing is that fossil fuels, as we phase them out, we need to make sure that we're not leaving minority populations with wastes, right? That's another thing that minority populations often find, is that they live next door to garbage collection areas or waste sites. So we need to make sure that that's not the case as we transition away from fossil fuels. But then also just making sure that we are doing this as a group. We have to work together as a globe to create policies that we all agree with, which again, think about worldwide, that's a major issue. How do we get all of these countries to agree to do something that's going to be effective overall? This COP27 just ended at the end of November, and it was good in that the Historic Loss and Damage Fund was announced. So this is being developed. So this loss and damage, meaning the countries that are not the ones putting out those emissions, they are going to be able to access money to help them deal with the floods and the damage from the hurricanes and the typhoons, the fires, right, the droughts. The problem is details that came out. So it was, okay, we're going to make this fund, but there was no details about who would be putting money in, who could take money out, where does that money come from, how much is that money, so all of these are details that need to be worked out. But it is positive because we're moving towards making changes. So unfortunately, I think we need to be moving a little bit faster than we are in doing these things. So not to be all doom and gloom, thinking about what we can do individually, right? I think it's important to remember that we are all important and our actions all do matter. And what I do every day matters to the biosphere and to climate change. So we have to think about all these different things and ways that we can do things, right? So making sure that I am using less energy, right? Turning things off. Can I find ways to get to school or to work and not use transportation that's using fossil fuels? Can I ride my bike? Can I use public transportation that is using different types of energy sources? Think about consuming less water, right? Consuming generating less waste, reusing things. Again, we are a consumable society. So if we can find ways to reuse things, that's going to be really important. And then, of course, the environmental justice piece is what we were just talking about. So this has got to be at the core of what we're doing, in addition to all these things we're doing individually and as a country and worldwide. But the environmental justice piece is really what we need to do globally. And I think that's where we as scientists, we need to spend more time talking with people about this issue that, yeah, we understand the science, but there's got to be more that we can do to educate people, but then also to let people know that we see this, we get it, right? That these inequities have been in place for long periods of time. These are deeply rooted things, right? If we talk about institutional laws and countries, right, that have been around for much longer than the United States, and we need to figure out how can we create justice for everyone in the world, and how can we do that quickly, because we need to figure that out. So thank you for listening. Hopefully, oh good, wasn't too long. I'm going to close this so I'm going to see your faces now. Any questions or thoughts? Again, this is a lot. It's a big topic. It's, you know, it feels kind of daunting, but I am a very positive person, and I feel that we can make changes, and we as scientists need to be the force that is pushing a lot of this. So I think that there's a lot of good things that we can do. We just need to help spread the message and help convince others that we can make these changes, and we need to do it. We need to do it for ourselves, but we need to do it for future generations as well.
Well, that was really a wonderful lecture, Sarah. So I'll start with a small thought. So what I think is that if we have to make a change, if we have to bring in a change, we will have to start it from our homes. So when we raise our kids, we have to give them and we have to show them models where we are trying to do something that could help our earth in future. So it could be just a simple thing where we are avoiding plastic jars or plastic utensils at our home. So even such a small things will teach the kid that how important it will be to do such a small thing that will help to save our earth. So that's what I think. So now it's a session for questions, and any thoughts you have, you can freely open up and speak for all these participants.
Hi, Sarah. Let me ask one question that you have mentioned about red line, no? So you please explain how this red line affect climate change. So what is the relation between red line and climate change? Can you please explain?
Yeah, so redlining is just the policy that was put in place to keep populations of color in certain areas. So it was to keep the white people separated from people of color. Now, it's not that causes climate change, but people that live in redlined areas are experiencing effects of climate change more than people who live in non-redlined areas. So they have more droughts, more floods, and particularly in the United States, it's the flooding that's a really big issue, and then these heat islands. So these people are living in more urban settings, so less green space that they have access to. So they are going to have major effects from really hot temperatures. So we see more deaths in those areas when we have heat waves. Because that's also areas where we find people that are homeless. So they don't have homes. And if they're living in the environment, right, and it's really hot, they're more likely to pass away or to die from those hot places. So really it's more that redlining is exposing people to the effects of climate change is really what it is.
Okay, Sarah, thank you. Your lecture was very nice. We have heard a lot of things about climate change, but you have your lecture was in such a way that how it is related to the environmental justice, and so we have to think about the environmental sustainability, no? So it was a very nice talk. You wonderfully explained it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's a big topic, and it feels kind of big and daunting, and but like I said, I'm positive because I feel like if we talk about this more, and the other thing is that we need to do a better job of, at least here in the United States, making it a non-political issue. It's not a political issue. It's an issue of, this is science, this is happening, and we need to understand our outsized role, right, in the problem. And I think that's another major problem, is that there's a lot of greed, right, in places that have money and more. I want more and I want more. And that's something that we need to overcome, is how do we shift to a we aspect, or a we think, right, instead of me. So I think that's what's really important, is that a lot of countries like the United States need to shift to a we think and not me, right? It's not all about me. And one thing I think that's really important, Asha and Cincy, is to get people out. People need to travel and go to other places and see, right? These people, they're wonderful people. They have different cultures and they have amazing places that we can visit, but it's one species, right? We're all together in this. And I think that there's a lot of people have these divisions in their mind, but that's not the case at all. Like, we should care about each other. And I wish that we could, and again, I think, Asha, you're right, starting at home is the best place to do it, in terms of modeling good behaviors, but also modeling the we think, right? That we are a global species and we should work together and care and try, right? And I do really have a positive thought about the young people. So at COP27, which was, it was in Egypt, there were quite a few young people that were really vocal and had outsized effects. What's the girl's name from Sweden? Greta Thunberg.
Greta Thunberg, yeah.
Yeah, she's amazing. So like people like her, right? That's the group of people that are going to make the major changes. And I just hope that we can get to the point where they're in charge, right? Where they can be the ones making policies, because they have the right idea in mind. And I think that generation is different in terms of wanting to make positive changes and understanding the we, less about the me. So I'm feeling positive that as we move toward that generation, that things will get better. So I think we as adults just need to make changes and push where we can, right? That's my goal, is to be as active as I can here to make changes, push for people that I agree with their policies, I like what they're doing with our government, so that we can help put people in place that would care about what's going on worldwide. That's, I think, the most important thing, is can we find leaders of influential countries and all over these places, right? We need to have leaders in place that care about other countries and not just about their own country. So I think that's very important. And like I said, the United States is a big factor in these problems. And I would like to be one of the people that wants to make changes. So.
Yeah, on that note of traveling, I would like to take this opportunity on behalf of St. Stephen's College to invite you to our country, visit our country, and have a look at the culture and the different aspects of climate of our country.
I would love to come. I totally want to make it happen. You have to tell me which time of the year is the best. What's the place? What's the time that I should come?
Yeah, I will just inform you, because it's continuously fluctuating these days.
I know, right? Climate change.
Yeah.
Yes, I know. Sandy and I are going to come. We've decided we got to make it happen.
Wow, cool. That's great.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, so now I invite all the other participants also to make their comments or any other opinions they have, so we could have a conversation here.
Please. Yeah, I'm always interested to hear what others have to say about it.
Hi, ma'am. Myself, I have a query. As we know, the climate change directly or indirectly affect our ecosystem. Is any action plan for conservation of microbes or microorganisms?
That is a really good question. We need to think about that. One thing that is happening because of the thawing of the Arctic ice is that there actually are microorganisms that haven't been exposed and out in our environment, right? They've been frozen in the layers of ice or the permafrost. So there have been studies showing that there are viruses that are coming out that have not been seen in like 40,000 years, right? And so that's something that's really interesting, that we're going to be exposed to new microbes, right? That we as a species haven't seen in a long time. So I think that's going to be an interesting piece of it. But I agree that we do need to think about how to preserve important microbes that we have now, right? I think that that's something that should be done. I'm not sure exactly how much work is going into preservation of what is around now, but I think it clearly should be something, because obviously biodiversity is very important, right? And we need to maintain that. But yeah, that's a really good question. I have to look more into what is being done, right, conservation-wise, in terms of what we have now. Because as the climate changes, we know that species will die off, right, as things change. And maybe even be replaced by the species that are being released, right, from the Arctic thawing, which is interesting too.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Important for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think there was even a thought regarding the coronavirus that the coronavirus might have been evolved from the icebergs when they just melted off. So
whoa,
yeah.
That's interesting. It could be. I mean, it definitely, you know, we're seeing things that we haven't seen before, and clearly having a major effect on us worldwide, since our bodies haven't seen these things.
Yeah.
And you, Asha, you study insects too. I imagine the insect populations are changing as well. I know, you know, at least from my experience with them in the United States, that if we don't have very cold winters, that we have more insects that stay around, and we have greater populations in the summer of insects. So that's what do you have about the insects that you could tell us then?
Yeah, a quick thought is that many of the insects, not even insects, but many of small animals that I used to find around our homes when I was young, is not to be seen anywhere now. So that's kind of a drastic change. It's not just insects, but many organisms, even plants. Yeah, so
Right.
it's affecting everything, every living organisms, everything.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. And again, if we think about evolution, right? Evolution is a natural process, and you know, mutations in our DNA lead to maybe advantages or disadvantages. But we are pushing things so quickly now, right, that we're changing the climate so quickly that lots of species are obviously going into extinction. Not a lot because of us, right? Loss of habitat, loss of, you know, we kill these things. But I think the climate change is going to be a major factor, like you say, in the loss of lots of species too. And we know that as we lose species, things shift, right? The number of things are going to shift, and that changes. Everything is connected, as you say, right? And everything is influencing everything else. So we do need to consider the loss of those populations as important things. Yeah.
Yeah, so do we have any other participants to come forward with their thoughts, opinions, comments, questions, anything?
I promise I won't bite.
Good evening, ma'am. Myself, Thomas Casey, Faculty of Social Science. Let me ask one query. And my opinion also, that I think this environmental protection, actually, it should start from grassroots level and not from the top policy making body. And also the current scenario, the environment protection actually is a value that must be inculcated among the people, just like love, affection, and so on. It should be some value which must be followed by the entire human being. Otherwise, by imposing an act or rule to protect the environment may not be working properly. That's my one opinion. And also the greed of the human being that actually depletes and pollutes the environment. Do you agree?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think greed is a major problem, a big reason why we're here, right? It's people wanting more and more and more for me. And that's a major problem. I love that you talk about starting at the bottom, the grassroots, and moving up. I think that's an excellent way to do things. We just need more people to do it, right? And not even just more people, but more people in more countries need to do it collectively. And maybe even it would be interesting if we could find a way for, and I'm sure this probably already happens, and we need to do more of it, is to collectively come up with people that are not in political positions of power worldwide to work together to find ways to influence people that are in government and can make these decisions. I think that is excellent. And I agree, we need to educate our kids and make it valuable, right? That this is something that you should value. You should value the environment. You should value people in other places that are not just your culture, right? That we all are important. And if we think about, again, maintaining our biosphere, we all are a part of that. And Homo sapiens are so weird. We have an outsized effect on everything, right? That goes on around us. So we're a very interesting species because of the outsized effects that we have. But we have the ability for great change because of our big brains. So I'm hopeful that we can make those changes, Thomas. I think that would be excellent. And sociology and those fields are so important to me. And I'm spending a lot of time reading and thinking about those fields and how they interconnect with biology and science. And we're not going to be able to make the changes that we need to make unless we have groups of us coming together that see and know about these different areas, right? So I think that's awesome that you're thinking about it too. And finding a way to incorporate that into your teaching, I think, is an excellent way to do it as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Very good. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yes, so there was a person in India who was named as Sundarlal Bahuguna. He and his wife together, they started a movement which was titled as Chipko movement. And in this movement, they were teaching people to hug trees. So through that, they were trying to develop a compassionate feeling for nature and not to cut down the trees. So I think there are many people around us who take initiative to develop such a emotion, like Thomas sir has told, to develop an emotion that we have to save our nature and our planet. So it's really appreciable for those kind of people who are taking the initiative.
Right. Yes, I love it. I know, and it's so interesting because I have 2 kids, and I'm trying my best to work with them and teach them these things by modeling good behaviors. But then you get into a situation where you're like so busy and you're like, I just want something easy or something fast, right? And usually that's not something that is a sustainable choice, or you're not making choices for the better good when you're in those moments. What I really would like is for the choices that are sustainable and better for the earth and better for me health-wise, right, even, is to make those fast choices and those easy choices the good choices, right, for the earth. And I think that's what we need more of, is just more people who care enough to put those policies in place, right? Like, I mean, again, the United States, we just do so many things terribly wrong. And one of the things I'm thinking of is like food coloring, right? Food coloring and food dye, it's carcinogen that causes cancer, and we put it in everything. We don't have to do that, right? We do it because it's cheap and because companies make more money if they use cheaper chemicals. So that's the thing. I wish that it wasn't the case that everybody cared about money so much and not about the individuals and the families and the world, right? So that's the thing, that it's all sort of collective. And I agree, Thomas, you mentioned greed. I think it's it all comes back to that. I don't know what it is, but it's got to be, and now that I'm just talking as I'm thinking right now, but thinking about evolutionarily, right, as a species, and as we are a very social species, and we had our social groups, our family clans, right, we kept each other alive. Resources is what, if you collected resources and had resources, that helped your group to stay alive, right, in terms of building shelters or finding food. So maybe it's even a part of our innate system is to want to gather resources, right? And now resources are money. But in the past it wasn't. It was, it was things, right? Animals and food and shelter. So maybe it's a leftover piece of, this is how I provide for my family and make sure that everybody stays alive and well, right? So that's, yeah. I don't know where that goes, but just thinking out loud, like, about some of these ideas. Yeah, it's all very interesting for sure. And Mary Martin, I see you were in our class. Awesome. Glad to see you here.
Yeah, so if there are no more questions, maybe we can conclude. So I invite Dr. Cincy Joseph, the coordinator of the program in our department, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Oh, Cincy, we can't hear you.
Sorry, just muted. Okay. Dear Sarah, Asha, and then other participants of the program, our QUAESITio, the life science session is coming at the first day of its program, and the
Yeah, I think she has got the technical issue of network connection.
She's just really good at staying still.
Dr. Cincy?
Technology is always so great, right?
Yeah.
Never works when you want to.
Yeah, I think she's lost.
Okay.
In that gap, is there anyone who want to make a comment? I'll just wait a few seconds for Dr. Cincy to join again. Yeah, she's back.
okay. Sorry for the problem. There was a technical problem with my phone. Anyway, I hope you all have heard my what I said. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Asha?
Yeah, we can hear you right now, but we didn't hear what you said before.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, respected resource person, Sarah, and our HOD, Biju sir, and other participants. Our QUAESITio program is at its first day. The life science session is continuing for next day also, for tomorrow also. Sorry. Okay, first of all, I take this opportunity to give my thanks to the resource person, Dr. Sarah, and she is the Associate Professor from Sinclair College, USA. And also, I take this opportunity to thank our HOD, Biju sir, and also our principal, Dr. Stephen Matthew, and bus sir, Father Jeans Nelikatil, and then our research cell convener, Dr. Jisha George, and then our vice principal, Dr. Thomas Casey is here, and also all the participants joined here. Thank you once again. Okay, thank you. Bye.
Have a good night, everybody. Thanks for coming. It was good to see you too.
And you have a good day.
Thank you. I will. This is a good way to start the day. I like it.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody. We'll be in touch soon. Asha and Cincy.
Yeah. Okay, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bye.